All right, chapter 14 of Gregor and the Prophecy of Bane. The last thing they said was Whirlpool! Whirlpool? The only thing Gregor could think of was that game. His cousins had an old, round, above ground pool. All the kids would try to run around in a circle and make the water swirl around, so there was a sort of funnel effect in the middle. He knew there were real whirlpools in the ocean, but he'd never seen a picture of one. Gregor jumped to his feet and tried to make sense of the situation. Everyone was up, but they were confused too. The Underlanders usually faced an emergency with precision, as if they'd drilled for this crisis a million times. Gregor had a feeling that none of them had ever dealt with a whirlpool either, and that they had no emergency response at the ready. Photos Gloglo and Zap were burning at full brightness, but there still wasn't enough light to see far out into the water. Gregor pulled out the biggest flashlight he had, one with a wide sweeping beam, and clicked it on. What he saw took his breath away. The boats were on the outer edge of a huge vortex. The whirlpool must have been at least 100 yards wide. That's 300 feet. The water was rushing at a dizzying speed, grasping at anything in its reach, carrying it around and around until it was sucked down into a black, gaping hole in the center. Howard and Meredith were shouting at each other across the rope that tethered the two boats together. "I'm cutting loose!" Howard yelled as he began to hack away at the rope between them. "No!" Meredith cried. "The flyers will carry us out." "They can only take one boat. Do it, Meredith. Pandora can come back for me," Howard shouted, and the rope severed under his sword. It was just in the nick of time. The lead boat containing Howard, Pandora, Twitch Tip, and Zap was snagged by the outer ring of the whirlpool and carried off into the maelstrom. It was only a matter of seconds before the second boat would meet the same fate. Gregor lunged for the stern for Boots, who was half asleep, so he could get her back in her life jacket. He'd taken it off so she could sleep comfortably. Obviously, that had been a bad decision. He fumbled with the jacket's tangled straps. The boat suddenly yanked to the side. "It's got us!" Gregor cried out. But then there was an upward jerk. Gregor sprawled forward, barely avoiding crushing Boots, and found they were rising out of the water. The bats were lifting them using the rope loops on the side of the boat. Aurora and Andromeda were in the front, Ares and Pandora in the back. "Go, Pandora! Ares can take it. Go!" Gregor heard Meredith order. Ares spread his feet, holding his own loop in one claw and grasping Pandora's in the other. The boat dipped down a bit, but the big black bat soon had it under control. "Man, he's strong," thought Gregor. Pandora hovered for one moment to make sure Ares had things covered, then dove. Gregor leaned over the side of the boat to see what was going on. They were 50 feet above the water now, safe from the clutches of the raging whirlpool, but below them it was another matter. The lead boat, with Howard and Twitch Tip clinging to the mast, was spinning helplessly around in a whirlpool, smashing into debris, buckling under the pressure of the current. Except for the light from Gregor's flashlight, the boat was in complete darkness. "This is certainly an inconvenience," said a whiny voice by his ear. Gregor turned to see Zap sitting on a coil of rope. "It was my time to sleep, too. I hope Photos Gloglo does not think this means I will cover his next shift." "Zap, what are you doing? Get down there so they can see," said Gregor. "Oh, no, we never agreed to go into dangerous situations. We are not fed enough for that," said Photos Gloglo. And then he actually yawned. Gregor spun back around to the whirlpool in time to see Howard launch himself out over the water, arms straight out to his sides. Pandora caught him by the arms and carried him straight up to safety. She set Howard in a soggy pile on the floor and took her rope handle back from Ares. Down in the water, Twitch Tip still clung desperately to the mast. The boat was quickly approaching the inner rings of the whirlpool and the black hole in the center. "Wait a minute!" Gregor cried. "Aren't you going back in for Twitch Tip?" There was no answer. He looked to Meredith, to Luxa, to Howard, dripping and panting on the floor. Something in their faces made a chill go through him. "She's going to drown, you know. We've got to go in and get her." "It is not possible, Overlander," said Meredith. "We cannot reach her by boat. A single flyer could not get hold of her. It is not possible." "Luxa?" said Gregor. She was queen. She could probably make them if she wanted. I think Meredith is right. We will risk more loss in the effort, and the likelihood of success is almost non-existent, said Luxa. But we need her! We need her to navigate in the labyrinth, said Gregor. Why were they just standing there? The bats will be sufficient, said Meredith, and they can be trusted. So that was it. Now he understood. It's because she's a rat. You're going to sit here and watch her drown because she's a rat, right? If it were Howard, or Andromeda, or even Temp, you'd be down there, all right, but not for a rat. You probably have killed her already if you could have. Below him, Twitch-Tip's boat snapped in two. She clung to the wreckage for a few seconds, and then it was swept out of her grasp. She clawed her way through the water, fighting to keep from going under, but she wasn't going to last. The life jacket was on the floor next to Boot. He shoved his arms through the straps and buckled it with shaking hands. The small flashlight, the one Mrs. McCormick had given him, was in his pocket. He flicked it on. Maybe he could hold it between his teeth. Hands grabbed him as he climbed up the side of the boat. Don't be a madman, Overlander, said Howard. You can't help her. You make me the sickest of all, said Gregor. You were just down there a minute ago. You got rescued, and what about what you swore about saving anyone in water trouble, in peril? What was that you said? Howard's face flushed. Gregor had touched a nerve. Gregor! Luxa had his hand. I forbid you to go, Gregor. You will not survive. Not with you guys as backup, said Gregor. He was so furious he could have thrown her over the side of the boat. See how she liked it down there. Rip Red brought her for me. He brought her to help me so I could help you guys and your whole stupid kingdom, he said. That's why we're doing this, right? He stood on one of the seats and shone his light down in the water. Man, was he really going to jump down into that? They were right. It was insane. Even if he'd been the best Olympic swimmer in the world, he'd never swim his way out of that, especially pulling some big old rat. But he knew something else, too. He knew that the Underlanders needed to keep him alive at all costs. If he went in, they'd come after him. And if he could get to Twitch-Tip, they'd have to save them both. Howard started lashing something around his body. Untie me, Gregor said, taking a swing at him. It's a lifeline, Howard said, ducking the blow. We will hold on to you from this end. You will? Said Gregor. Do not fight the current. It will have no effort. Ride it as best you can, said Howard. Gregor balanced on the edge of the boat for 1 second, stuck his flashlight between his teeth, braced himself, tried to forget about how much he hated heights, and jumped. The shock of the cold water occupied him for about a millisecond before all his attention was on the current. He was nothing, a twig, a gum wrapper, an ant being carried along by an immense force of the whirlpool. He felt himself yanked back up by the rope. They had him from above. He was being lifted, swung out over the dark, sucking hole at the center of the whirlpool. For a moment he had the crazy idea that they were going to drop him into it, and then he understood. Twitch-Tip was on the inner ring of the vortex, maybe 1, maybe 2 times more around, and she was gone. As they swung him to meet her, Gregor tried to think of how he could get hold of the rat. There was no time to work out a strategy. As he came in, he did the one thing that came naturally. He opened his arms. They smacked into each other, chest to chest. His arms encircled her neck. His legs wrapped around her body. Twitch-Tip dug her claws into the front of his life jacket. They spun around the whirlpool again. The current locked on them, pulling them down, not wanting to let them go. They can't do it, thought Gregor. We're going under. He squeezed his eyes shut tightly, waiting to be engulfed. Instead, there was a rib-crushing tug, and suddenly they were swinging free. Twitch-Tip's full weight hit him. If the rat hadn't gotten one claw embedded in the rope, he would have lost her. Don't let go, she choked out. Gregor couldn't free his teeth from the flashlight he had bitten down on so hard. He managed to open his mouth enough to say, no. They were carried over the water for a while until they were out of the whirlpool's reach. Then they were in the waves, half treading water, half using the life jacket to stay afloat. As the Underlanders reeled them in, hands pulled them into the boat. When he felt the floor beneath him, he released the rat. They lay side by side, gasping, coughing up water. This was extra tricky for Gregor since his teeth were still stuck in his flashlight. His ribs hurt from the final tug that had freed them. He hoped they were just bruised, not broken. If they ached, the pain was minimal compared to his arm. The bandage had been torn away by the current, and Gregor could see it in all of its glory. The whole forearm was badly swollen. The sucker wounds, which had turned a revolting shade of purple, oozed fluorescent green pus. They burned as if they were on fire. Ugh. Howard was at his side. He helped Gregor free his teeth from the flashlight and laid it on the floor. Gregor had a funny memory. When Mrs. Cormack had given him the flashlight, she had made a point of telling him it was waterproof. It even had a little sticker on the bottom that said so. He thought at the time that was silly. Why would you need a waterproof flashlight? Now he knew. Gregor gritted his teeth as Howard flushed out the wounds on his arm, poured a cooling solution over the skin, and bandaged it in fresh fabric. I know this comes a bit late, said Howard, but try to keep it dry. There was something in his eyes that reminded Gregor of Howard's grandfather, Vicus, an odd twinkle, even while the rest of his face remained serious. Gregor couldn't help laughing. Yeah, I'll do that. Howard toweled off Twitch-Tip and wrapped her in blankets. She was too exhausted to object when he poured a bottle of medicine down her throat. She went to sleep almost immediately. Is she all right? Gregor asked him. Yes, we must keep her warm. The cold water has been a shock, but she is a fighter, Howard said with respect. Boots came up and stuck a cookie in Gregor's mouth. You wet? Yeah, he said, spraying crumbs as he talked. Boots, go swim? We go swim? She said hopefully. Gregor was glad she hadn't been able to see over the side of the boat. Nah, it's too cold, said Gregor. I tried it, and it's too cold, Boots. Boots took a bite of a second cookie and poked the rest in Gregor's mouth. Yesterday, we go yesterday? She got time all mixed up. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, later, before, all pretty much meant any time that wasn't right now. Maybe we get home and it's warm again. I'll take you to the pool, said Gregor. Yes, said Boots. She patted his chest. You wet. Gregor got on some dry clothes and wrapped himself up in a blanket. He had to take his boots off for a while. They were waterproof, but not in a whirlpool. The boat was packed now with all 13 of them in it. Somehow everyone had found a place, but it was tight. Luxa sat next to Gregor and handed him something. Here, I made you a sandwich. He looked down at the clunky version of roast beef sandwich. He had taught her to make her first sandwich on their last trip. Thanks. He didn't eat it. Don't be angry with us, Gregor. Meredith and I have lost more than you know to the rats. It's hard for us to risk anything to save one, even if it is of use to us, said Luxa. She. Twitch-Tip is a she, and she had a bad time too. The rats chased her out because she's a scent seer, and she's been living all alone in the Deadland, said Gregor. Has she? Asked Luxa. I did not know this about her. Well, no, because no one talks to her, Gregor said, and then a pang of guilt. He hadn't been talking to her either. He hadn't wanted to ride in her boat. At least he'd gone in to save her. But she's incredible. You should see her in action. I mean, maybe she didn't know what to do in a whirlpool, but she could tell all the way from the arena to the palace what color of shirt Boots was wearing. And once we're in the labyrinth thing, I think she's the only way we'll find the Bane. His words were tumbling out now. He couldn't stop them, but he couldn't organize them quite right either. And Rip Red brought her. Vicus told me once he had wisdom. Unique wisdom. Well, more wisdom than, practically anyone. Okay, so if he brought her, he must need her. And anyway, besides that, it's no good, Luxa. He paused to get it right. It's no good to sit up in a boat and watch her drown. Gregor took a bite of the sandwich, more to stop talking than anything. It was all so confusing, the whole thing with rats and the humans. They had killed Luxa's parents, and he didn't know how many others she loved. Another thought struck him. Helping a rat doesn't make you like Henry, you know. You see it that way. Others might not, she said. They sat in silence while he ate his sandwich. He couldn't argue with her there.